If you were raised in a household where you were always told, get over it, it's fine, or if things are just pushed under the rug, it becomes really hard for you to rely on people. I believe kids who are now adults like you and I, who come from a place who had everything on face value. Your parents are good people, your parents are good parents, they grew you well, they showed up as your mom and dad or guardian. However, there was a lack of emotional availability because maybe our parents did not have that emotional support from their parents, our grandparents. So they never spoke about feelings, emotions. Many of us come from places where emotions and mental health is not looked at the same value that is now. So growing up, we as kids, that emotional aspect was not there. This has nothing to do with the financial aspects, nor with how much they love you. Because they loved you the same and they did whatever they could in their financial capacity, and that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about connection with our parents where we could discuss feelings and emotions openly. Many a time, some of us have grown up in households where emotions were never discussed. We were always told, it's okay, just get over it, come on, you got this, and you move on. Or things go bad, people go in silent mode, and after a few days, your parents do something great for you, or you do something good for your parents, and everything is just swept under the rug, like nothing ever happened. So if you've grown up in a household where emotions were never actually ever discussed, when things were never spoken in the open, when the elephant in the room was never addressed, but because they were parents and because you're kids, you're supposed to just move on like nothing ever happened. And so we move on like nothing ever happened. And growing up, we never thought that it was a big deal. But as kids, we start bottling things up inside. And when we start to bottle things up inside, we naturally start going within. And of course, we all have a grown-up age and teenage years where we're rebellious, where we do a lot of dumb shit. But a lot of dumb shit comes from emotions that are bottled up. And these emotions have a really aggressive way of coming out on the world and the people. Until we don't grow up and learn those hard lessons, we get emotionally jaded growing up because we cannot really speak up about how we feel. And therefore, when we go out in the world, outside of our parents, to talk about emotions, to connect with people emotionally, either they'll receive you happily, or secondly, and the most times, they call you overbearing. Because nobody knows that you as a kid, how were you grown when it came to the emotional aspect of things. So as kids, as grown-ups, either we become extremely dependent on emotions and we lead with emotions all the damn time, and we cannot really put a boundary between practicality and emotional outbursts for the longest period, is because we had been shut up for so long without wanting to create a scene. Or secondly, we become so cold, we become so quiet that we feel no world will ever understand how we feel, and therefore nobody ever knows how we feel, and we always walk around with a poker face. And in between all of that, people fall in love, people fall out of love, people get cheated, friends jade you, strangers hurt you. School, college, life happens. And when life happens, we all have our own moments of awakening. And that's when the universe sits you down to finally make you understand how many emotions are within you. And when you finally take that time to go internal, you have to reparent yourself. So however long it must take you, 10 years, 1 year, 5 years, you have to sit with yourself to really treat yourself how you wished you had been treated. So before you make any hasty decisions on someone else and how they can't emote or express themselves, is probably because they were never heard as growing up, because emotional intelligence and discussions were probably never a thing growing up in their life. And on the other hand, if they are an emotional wreck and if they have emotional outbursts, they probably had a lot of emotions that were bottled up, which was never heard. And this person has not really worked on themselves, and now they're bleeding on other people, and that is natural. And you as a human being can excuse yourself from these people as well. But at the end of the day, you need to understand that emotions is a very sensitive topic, and it is not something that only weak people have. Emotions is a human thing, but unfortunately we are brought up in a society where we are meant to dust the shit off and walk away like nothing ever happened, because everybody wants to be strong, and emotions makes you weak. No, emotions makes you deep. Emotions makes you a human being. It makes you a soul, a spirit who can feel. So if you're somebody who feels heavily, and if you're somebody who can't really connect with people, and you already know why, then take some time out and sit with yourself. Because it's only when you go within, you can really understand the depth of your emotions. As kids, it's really hard for some of us to even decipher what certain emotion even meant, because kids feel deeply. Kids have a very thin veil with the 5D, 8D, 9D, whatever. And if some of us are raised in households where emotional discussions were not a thing, then how do you expect to understand emotions now in your big age? And how do you expect people around you to understand your emotions when it is so complicated for you to understand, and you have so much emotions bottled up already? Therefore, you carry on with life putting emotions in the background. You started thinking with your mind, you start living through your mind, and everything in your life now is either extremely practical or either extremely emotional. There is no middle ground between you being practical and you being emotional. So either you go extremely cold and you live a life where you start raising people just as how you were raised, where discussing emotions or showing emotions is a weakness, and you think you're weak because you have emotions. It's probably because you haven't even tapped into how you felt about certain situations growing up. And because you're so scared to even face that feeling again, you just ignore it and you just live life however you want to. So you may have the best life, the happiest life on the outside, but when you look inside, you'll still feel some kind of emptiness, don't you? Or you can be one of those who gets extremely emotional about every little thing that happens in your life. So soon, you are either termed to be the drama king, the drama queen, and if it's not that, everything is internal in you. You become so emotionally impaired internally that everything about people, world is about you. You take everything personally. You don't even understand why a person behaves the way he or she does, and you take it all on you. So you either start blaming yourself for everything that happens to you, even when you know that those people, that thing was wrong, or you start blaming the world. You start blaming people, things, objects, and you just become a constant complainer. You start yelling, whining, just living in chaos. When you live in chaos, you love people who are chaotic. Misery loves company. And it all goes down to how was emotions treated with you, with your parental figure. We all have friends, we all have other family members who we probably felt some kind of connection to discuss emotions. I'm not talking about that, but what was ingrained in you while you were raised. Did that emotional conversations and discussions happen? And is that something that you want to continue, that has happened in your bloodline already? Or is that something that you want to sit with yourself, understand why you behave and how emotions make you feel, and then change your way? But that is 10%. People die, people be born again, die again. It's just a cycle, because no one talks emotions. No one talks about why you feel, why you do the things you do, but all talk about how it happened and why it happened on face value. But when you look inside and deep within, you'll fully understand the psyche of a narcissist. What happened with her? What happened with him growing up? The psyche of a cheater, a scammer. Anybody who wants to hurt other people are because they are hurt. And people who like to see other people fail, repent. People who like to see other people fail, cry. It gives them some pleasure on the inside, is because they have something that is extremely broken on the inside, because growing up, it was never a norm to discuss these emotions. So it all comes from within. At the end of the day, do you want to be good people or bad people? Do you want to continue the cycle or do you want to break the cycle? Because everybody comes with their own cycles to break. And you want to give your emotions the respect that you have ignored for so long. So when you start respecting your own emotions, you then start having some kind of boundaries up. And when you start having those boundaries up, you start to see who is a replica of what people you grew up with. Because many a times when you don't discuss emotions and when you just follow the crowd and do everything what else is doing, when you don't challenge the status quo, is when you're putting your emotions aside, because no two people can feel the same. And the fact that you bite your tongue because you think you're doing too much because emotions were never discussed, that should tell you that you are a follower. And when you are a follower, you feel empty inside. But 90% of the world live for society's validation. 90% of the world is happy as long as the phone is buzzing, they're invited everywhere, they're in herds. So they put their emotions aside and they don't even realize in this whole game of wanting people all the time around them and just wanting to be the cool ones or whatever it is the society wants them to be, because they do not want to challenge the matrix, don't want to go against the grain, because that will make them whatever it will make them. These people are empty people who don't even focus on how they feel. They don't even know if they actually like coming home to this human being, if they actually like being friends with that person, if they even enjoy those conversations, if they even enjoy going to that place, if they even like their colleagues, whatever it may be. But because it is society's norm, they want to do it. But 90% of the world don't even want to know, how do you really feel? What is the inner child saying? And people don't even look into all of this when they're interacting with other human beings, because some of us may come from a place where there was full availability when it came to emotional intelligence, emotional discussions. But there are some of us also who come from a place who didn't have that emotional discussions, but they had everything they want. So don't touch people on face value. And this is not about who had a good childhood, bad childhood, whatever. I'm talking about people who got everything that they want and they asked for, and whatever capacity that may be. But still, that emotional connection when it came to having those emotional discussions about how you feel was never really there. So either you grew up being extremely self-independent and aloof, and you pretend to be dependent on people because you do not want to be left alone again, or you end up being so dependent that you just don't want to be left alone. And that's how you attract a lot of scammers, liars, cheaters, people who use you and want to abuse you. And unfortunately, we live in a world where we rather choose to be abused, cheated on, and whatever capacity that may be, as long as this person is with us, as long as this group of people stick with us, as long as I have this and that, because that's what the society sees, and I have to maintain my status, my life on face value. But how do you feel inside? And there's 10% of us who finally awaken in this lifetime, if we have to, because we realize life is not 3D. Life is more 5D. Life is more 9D even. We have our ancestors, our bloodlines. There's a reason why we're here. And it takes work to break these cycles, or you just come and die like you want to. And those 10% of the people end up being good parents, if I can add, or good people, because they know what it is to not be heard, to not be given a chance, whose emotions were never a topic of discussion growing up. So we know exactly how to not turn bitter, but turn better, because we've been bitter. We've been a bully. We've been worse. We've been a cranky. We've been all of that you are. But 10% of us chose to face our demons, chose to go within. And that is extremely difficult, because many of them don't even make out of it, if you know what I mean. Somebody's trying to rewire themselves so that our descendants don't go through that shit. We are changing ourselves because that is generational trauma, karma. So how dare you want to become like somebody else and swap destinies? That doesn't even make sense to me.